Welcome back, folks, to another episode of Business from the Bass Boat Podcast. I am your host, Adam Deakin, and today's show is brought to you by Rec Lending. Interest rates dropping right now, so pay attention to your boat loans, RV loans, side-by-sides, all that sort of a thing. Good time to kind of refinance, and we'll have more to come there shortly. But without further ado, as I'm sure a lot of you have seen in the fishing industry, a lot of changes going on with regulations when it comes to professional and different leagues are releasing things. Bailey and I hopped on and did a quick news segment in relation to Bassmaster's release, some of the NPFL release. And I thought it would be great to get someone on who is not only an electronics dealer, but an angler with one of these leagues and talk things through. So longtime, fan of the show, guy we've had on the show a bunch, Mr. Trent Palmer, a guy that I spent having a couple of beers with, had a classic one time and enjoyed our conversation. But let's get Trent Palmer in here. What's going on, man?
What's up, buddy?
How are you doing?
Oh, not too shabby. Headed out this afternoon for my bachelor party, so we need this day to hurry on up out of here.
Heck yeah, man. Well, I think we were talking a little bit off air. I am also running to a friend's wedding that I am in this weekend back in Colorado. So I am jumping on a plane this afternoon from Idaho to get back to Colorado and looking to have a bunch of fun too. So congrats on that and enjoy the time with the boys.
Yeah, definitely. I appreciate it.
Heck yeah. Well, dude, for those who don't know, you are not only have fished the NPFL the last couple of years, champion, by the way, with the NPFL winner. In addition to that, kind of your main deal and where we've had you on Business from the Bass Boat in the past is Sonar Pros. You guys rig boats, do all sorts of stuff. Tell the folks a little bit about what you do with Sonar Pros.
Yeah, so in a nutshell, Sonar Pros, hence the name, is we kind of take a niche approach in the boat rigging department specific to electronics. That has definitely evolved over the years, where we're doing anything from electronics rigging to, I got an older Ranger in here we're working on right now that we're building a new live well system, which is pretty common we're seeing now, where we're taking old boats, and even though the hulls have an old hull ID number, we're bringing them to new standards. But in a nutshell, what we do is we sell and install electronics. We manufacture and install and sell our own in-house dedicated wiring harness. And we're subject matter experts. I get to utilize my time on the water and my expertise in tournament fishing and then apply that into the business, which is making sure your electronics are installed and functioning properly when they leave our bay doors.
Love it, man. Yeah, and I think some of my favorite things over the years, the two things that I follow on social media with Sonar Pros are, number one, looking at how boats are rigged out of a dealership and seeing the mess ups, and then those have been hilarious to me. Those crack me up, number one. And then number two, the crazy rigging that you have done on pros boats, right? Taku, guys like that, just seeing all these different intricate systems with so many units and graphs and everything else that go with things. Those are kind of the two things that always catch my eye.
Yeah, it's been crazy. To me, it ultimately doesn't matter what kind of boat or the caliber of electronics we're doing on a boat. We just love working on boats here. We get to see some crazy setups, like we did Taku and Koyo Fujita's boat this year, and we've done Taku's boat for I think 5 years now. They do some pretty crazy setups, and then we've got local guys or fun fishermen that all we're doing is putting one forward unit on the boat, or maybe he's getting side scan unit for the first time. To me, I am passionate about every aspect of these electronics, from side scan, down scan, 2D sonar, mapping, even nerdy things like, for me, getting audio systems to integrate with the graphs and having an absurdly loud audio system is some of my favorite stuff to do out here. So, but yeah, to your point, we do some pretty crazy rig jobs. We've done some, these controversial 6 and 7 graph setups, and then we also do the 1 and 2 graph setups. To us, a boat's a boat ultimately.
No doubt, man. Yeah, and I think that's where we should kind of transition into. Obviously, this season, I don't know, man. It has been a lot of noise, I guess is the best way to describe 2024 in the bass fishing world. Like, holy cow, the just inundated with conversations related to electronics, forward facing sonar, just buzzwords in the fishing community right now. And I guess at the end of 2024 here, we're finally starting to see, we've heard rumors from Bass, we've heard rumors, this and that. And so at this point on today, we're recording this the September the 5th, Thursday, 2024. NPFL has come out with what they're doing, and
Yep.
Bassmaster has come out with what they're doing. Still haven't heard from Major League Fishing yet. Certainly some speculation there. But number one, I guess let's talk NPFL because that relates to you, everything that you do, and they've kind of made their ruling going into 2025.
Yeah, and I guess for context for your viewers, I have fished with NPFL for 3 years now. This is my third season. Last year, won on Saginaw Bay. Season one, I fished, which was 2022. I finished 15th in the points. Last year, I finished 15th in the points. This year, we're fifth in AOI. I've had 3 top 10s back to back. The past 3 events that we've had. So I've been ingrained with the NPFL the past 3 years. I've loved every second that I have fished with them. I love the format. I love the schedule. Love the people that operate it. It's been a great deal. And because of that, my business, Sonar Pros, we invested in the league this year in a sponsorship that essentially gave us branding for the picture-in-picture live sonar view with Sonar Pros branding. And I did that because last year I helped the guys kind of do a little bit of investigating in hardware, figuring out which units we could plug into, which ones we couldn't, so that we could test that for the last 2 events last year, which we kind of showcased it on Eufaula, Oklahoma last year, where I was leading going to the last day and choked a little bit on the last day, but we were able to show what I was seeing on my live scope. So yeah, as far as NPFL, their decision, I'm sure it's no surprise. I'm not overly happy with it. I have seen some comments say, well, it's because he can't catch them without live scope. I can catch them with or without live scope. Doesn't matter to me. My first BFL I won in a foot of water on a buzzbait on Lake Hartwell. My NPFL event that I won on Saginaw Bay, half those fish were on live sonar. Half of them were not because they were so glued to the bottom you physically could not see them with live sonar. So for me, it doesn't matter. But the big aspect when it comes to why I'm displeased with it is mainly because what led up to it, which was, I caught wind of maybe this decision coming down and started working with the anglers and ownership to see if there was data or information we could provide to help with making that decision. So what I did, I had conversations with ownership, offered up that maybe an angler survey should be done, or at the time, maybe an angler meeting. I was told that maybe a meeting may or may not happen. So after some conversations with some anglers, I developed a survey, and pretty much with that survey, we got 100 of 118 active anglers to fill it out. And there's a lot of questions in it, but that survey pretty much, the big one to hit home on was the first question, which was, do you support forward-facing sonar on the NPFL? And 14% of those 100 anglers said no.
14%.
And 14%.
Wow.
And I'm a numbers guy. It then came out that we were going to have an angler meeting and we were going to have a certain amount of time to speak. And I simply just wanted data for that meeting, right? I really think what ultimately, selfishly what I wanted was a reduction to 1 transducer, and then to build regulation that defines the technology as it exists now. Say, the beam can't be narrower than 18 degrees. It can't be wider than 35 degrees. It can't shoot further than 150 feet. Can't have more than 200 watts of power. Can't have more than a quad core processor in the box. I felt like us maybe defining the technology would be a really good step in the industry. But here's the thing. It's not my business. I'm just a customer of the NPFL, and I was just offering up what I wanted. Obviously, it's advantageous for my business for sonar technology to still be utilized. But ultimately they made the decision, and because of that, I'm probably gonna have to look to fish elsewhere. Ultimately, is probably the position I'm in, which is unfortunate because I have loved fishing the NPFL, but it just I can't fish a league that no longer supports my business. And specifically putting up money for that picture-in-picture advertisement, and 4 tournaments in, a decision's made to ban that opportunity for that marketing. That just doesn't sit well with me.
Sure. No, I totally understand that. And so it sounds like you were more or similar to maybe what BASS has released as far
Yep.
as a single transducer. They're defining, they're going to have a list of the forward facing sonar units that can be at play. And
Yep.
correct me if I'm wrong here. Is that simply from the standpoint of like the saltwater live scope unit and those types of things? Is that what they're trying to potentially get rid of there? Or
Yeah, I saw Bass's ruling, and it pretty much called out that you couldn't have the LVS 62, which is the saltwater transducer. To me, that really doesn't matter. I'm not a fan of the 62 transducer. While it shoots far, the definition just isn't there. You can shoot a 34 almost the same distance and still get a relatively similar picture. For me, this whole topic of like forward sonar, good, bad, and different, to me, none of us know, because there have not been until the states or federal level invest money into biologists to study if we're truly doing it. None of us know. Now, I know that there was a study done by I think Texas Wildlife and Parks, and they came in that it really wasn't affecting the fish.
right.
My personal belief, and to get this out of the way too, like obviously it's advantageous for technology to stay around for my business. But with that said, because I had someone, you and I were talking before we got on here, regardless if there's forward sonar or not, there's a lot of other aspects in technology that still have to get installed on boats: side scan, down scan, 2D sonar, Mega 360, network boxes, all that stuff. The type of boats that we were rigging for professional level tournaments was under 1% of all the boats we rig. So for me, like, yeah, do I still want to be able to utilize forward sonar myself and still install those systems because we enjoy them? Yes. But I am not trying to come from the stance of I own a business and I want to stay around because I'm greedy and I want that money. That's not the case, because in reality, there's a lot of other aspects to rigging that generate revenue than just forward sonar. Forward sonar is just a portion of the big picture, right? What frustrates me, though, in the whole thing, I would say for the most part, is since none of us have that biological data, all we can go off of is what we know from our own bodies of water. And for me, Lake Lanier being my home lake, I have seen the cycle of this lake change over the past 10 years, in that the sport has grown so much and our angler population is so overly educated now that inherently, through the growth of the sport, the more tournaments on the lake, anglers getting on the same education level, that has what has put pressure on the fish and educated them, which has moved us to this position where finesse tactics like your dice or your jig head minnow or a Nico rig are very, very productive because of overfishing and overpopulation of educated anglers on a lake. And it's not a bad thing. Like, it's great that we have social media platforms for the sport to grow. But, when I first would move up here, you could go throw a chrome 95 size gunfish with a front runner and wear them out. You literally don't get bid on that anymore because everyone and their brother knows how to do that now. So,
Yeah, I mean, my take on all of this is I'm big into hunting as well, right? And so a lot of the stuff technology wise is advancing like crazy in hunting, right?
yep.
The same thing is happening. Garmin is huge on bow sights and all kinds of crazy things. And then you have thermals and all this stuff is related to technology. It's how humans have evolved. We bump everything up technology wise. And I think it falls on the regulators to decide what is ethical, what is not ethical. And then more so, actually, outside of that, even I think it's like harvest and bag limits related to everything, right? So it's like, okay, if the same amount of deer are taken off the landscape as they would be without this technology, so long as we get to a point ethically where we feel like something is fair, they're just doing it. Hunters are just doing it more efficiently, per se. I've kind of viewed it the same way in fishing. Is like if it is like actually affecting fisheries, which I do think, right, there's some data that has shown that it hasn't, from catch rates perspectives and things from at least the interviews we've had on related to that. But at the end of the day, If a guy is releasing bass, doesn't matter if he's catching them, looking at them with forward facing sonar or not.
Yep.
From that standpoint. And then, like you said, things evolve, right? Like I mean, I can't tell you when before the A rig got popular, how crazy good the A rig was. And you can still certainly catch fish on it, but it's not nearly to the power that
No, nowhere near as effective. I mean, heck, our bite window on Lanier is like a 6 week window every year for the A rig to work. Other than that, it's a waste of time to throw. And that's a point too. Like I don't think the A rig should be banned. I really don't anymore. I think it's past the point of where it was such a dominant technique. And ultimately the decision NPFL made, I get it from a business standpoint. They did it for business reasons. I don't necessarily agree with the article that was released saying it was for ethical fishing practices, something along those lines. I don't have it in front of me. But ultimately, I know they did it because they wanted to segment themselves from the other leagues, and they wanted to increase viewership to their platform, which will potentially result in additional sponsor dollars and stuff like that. I know why they made the decision. Does it mean I have to agree with it? No. And that's the best part about being in the country we are. We can all agree and disagree and go our separate ways. I'm just disappointed from the standpoint that, it's put me in a position to leave a platform that I really enjoy. But it is what it is ultimately. But yeah, this whole topic, I can't stand arguing anymore because, the whole thing with our sport, I'm in a fortunate position in my business. I get to see the investment the youth is putting into this sport, bigger than the youth movement was when I was in college fishing in 2010 to 2015. There's more anglers now, more parents now investing in their youth getting involved in fishing than ever before. And I do feel a large portion of that is because of the adoption of technology. These kids, how old are you again?
I'm 28.
So I'm 33. We're relatively close to the same age. So, we kind of came up in the age of where video games started getting popular. They're way more popular than they are now. And I think because of that adoption of the video games and all that stuff that kids are doing nowadays, the live scoping has kind of given them an angle to where, hey, I still get that screen utilization, but I'm also in the outdoors and I get to be competitive. And that's the thing I'm worried about in decisions like this is while it might make certain individuals happy for the next 5 to 10 years in their career, what is that going to do to impact our customer base that's going to support the industry for the next 20 to 30 years? That's what I'm curious about in this whole thing.
Yeah. No, it's a interesting point that I hadn't really thought about as far as the youth and what kind of a movement is there. I totally agree. I don't know. I mean, over especially the last couple of years, anytime that I've fished down on Rayburn, Toledo Bend, I'm sure down by you, any of these big bodies of water that have massive high school tournaments, the college movement is just crazy right now. And you see all of this stuff kind of being entered in to things. It's gonna be interesting where things go. I guess one comment on the NPFL move when this first got released, my initial take was, I think a wise business decision from the NPFL, and the reason I say that is there is clearly a market out there. Like I think this is fan based. That's my opinion on this. Of like,
Yep.
And I think that there's a market out there that is so annoyed with the electronic stuff, and the squeaky wheels, is gonna squeak the loudest, right? Or whatever
Definitely.
that. And so you have some of this so much hate towards things. Then you have people like myself who are kind of more in the middle, and then you have people who are all for all gas when it comes to stuff. And so, but that segment, right? I feel like is like craving that. And so, in my opinion, it was like a grab at maybe that segment of viewership, or try to take some of that away from people who are frustrated with bass and MLF. In addition to the anglers, right? Like kind of your old heads at Bash, your old
Definitely.
heads at
Definitely.
wherever that are kind of, struggling right now, competing against these youth and different things from that perspective of like, hey, maybe I can go kind of compete at this level. So I think there's going to be a wave of anglers, right? And you're one of the guys who's leaving maybe. And then you have
Yep.
these guys coming in that didn't like the technology in the first place or don't want to learn and, are getting beat by it, right? Just
Yep.
being honest with it.
Yeah, definitely. Like I said, my personal standpoint is I am unhappy with the decision. Does that mean it was a bad decision for the NPFL? No. I mean, obviously, it's segmented them to now have I've seen tons of comments where people are like, never knew about the NPFL before. I'll check it out now.
Wow.
So it's doing its job there. And I definitely know for a fact that part of the business decision was the intent to try to entice other anglers that possibly have a following to come in. And to your point, it's a smart business decision. If you pull in certain prolific anglers from Bass and Bass Pro Tour, and you pull in potential sponsors here and there that want to support a league that doesn't have forward sonar, it can definitely result in an increase in viewership. Which, here's the thing that a lot of people I think forget, and part of the argument of like fishing, live sonar fishing being boring, is the entire reason sponsors pay money to these organizations is for views. That's it. It's kind of like old school television in a way, right? And if you don't have those views, you're not going to get those sponsor dollars. And that was kind of what I understand to be kind of that brick wall for the NPFLs. They just weren't getting the views on their platform that they really needed to get all these big sponsor investments. And I do hope that going forward that it works out for them and they get sponsor investments and they get these anglers that come in and the league takes off to be the no forward sonar league. The one thing that I just don't that I see the comments of everyone saying, great, we're going to go back to old school fishing. What I don't understand is, how does a league banning forward sonar magically make Larry the largemouth go back up to the bank, get in a bush, and wait for a spinnerbait to come by? Because those old school Bassmaster videos, or not old school, but when they were edited shows, that was 8 hours of fishing condensed to a 45-minute show that had artificial drama edited into it. And I freaking love those shows.
Oh, yeah.
But those fish that you saw on those shows and how they were caught don't exist anymore. Again, to my point, our fisheries have gotten overpressured and those fish have moved. So my theory is you're probably next year going to still see anglers staring at their screens using 360 and 2D to target those offshore fish. I think you're still going to have the same viewership experience. What almost would have been more interesting to me is ban jighead minnows. That would have changed a lot.
That would be interesting. Holy cow.
Yeah.
That would have changed a lot.
A lot.
And but you know what? And something I think about, Trent, with like jighead minnow is like at some point, and now there's the staples, right? Like as far as the baits that outlast everything are your simple and boring baits, right? Like they get bit. It's your Senko, it's your drop shot, it's the easy stuff. The jighead minnow, in my opinion, is in that category, right?
Agreed.
But we're starting to see it change, right? Like it's harder for me to get bit on it in places.
Definitely.
I mean, do you anticipate that it's going to be dominant forever, or is it going to be in a cycle in 3 years from now?
Again, it's not. I think it depends on the fishery, because it's not like bass are telecommunicating across the country with each other, like, "Hey, don't eat this stupid minnow in front of us." But I think I'll use our Pickwick event. Our Pickwick event this year is a good example. So, day one of the event, I only had like 15 pounds. I had the opportunity to big bag, but I lost a couple big ones. But then day 3 of our event, I had, I think, 23 and change. I caught all those fish on a jighead minnow, every single one of them on a jighead minnow. But I threw at like 200 of them and I got 7 or 8 to bite. So that's an example of that is a body of water that is starting to get pressured with that bait and they're adapting. Now, what was interesting is day 3 of that tournament, I caught 1 fish on a jighead minnow and I caught the rest of them throwing a 1-ounce spinnerbait into brush piles, crashing it into brush piles and getting my arm ripped off and having a blast.
That's awesome.
Unfortunately, the camera guy left. They normally shut the show down at like 2 p.m. and they picked him up out of my boat. And then the last like 3 hours of that day, I just absolutely cracked him on a spinnerbait. But I think it's a good example of, like, depending on the fishery, there's going to be a point in time that a jighead minnow doesn't work anymore. I mean, it's just part of it. That the fisheries, again, as an angler population, or we're more educated than we've ever been before, because all the prolific pros and guys that want to get their name out, they're giving up all the juice on YouTube. I mean, I can go on YouTube and Google a body of water I'm headed to, and there is outstanding information on there about what to do, where to go, what to throw. And as an angler body, we're more educated than we've ever been before. And I think that's part of the reason our fisheries are getting pressured.
Totally. Yeah, I don't disagree there. It's incredible what you can learn on on YouTube and everything else today, and where you're going. I mean, there's just so much information and so many influencers kind of out there showing stuff. It's going to be super interesting to see how this all plays out, man. Like, I'm just
Definitely.
curious where Major League Fishing is going to sit on things. I think total guess here, but I think, like, okay, you have NPFL saying we're only going to do, nothing related to things. Oh, one question there, I guess. I saw that no forward facing in practice, but could that mean a guy could pre-practice with forward facing? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
And
that's my understanding is pre-practice, you would still be able to use it. But
okay.
official practice in the tournament events, you could not.
Got it. Okay. Interesting. Well, anyway, so I think, like, okay, NPFL is doing nothing. Bass is kind of riding the fence, and I don't think it's in a bad way. I think they're kind of figuring out where they want to be regulation wise. I mean, to me, it's a good move. And then I think maybe BPT is going to just leave it wide open. I have no idea, but this is just kind of my thinking. It'll be kind of a cool case study to see the three.
See where things go. Yeah. Like I said, I'm a numbers guy. I'd like to see how things play out across all three. If they were, NPFL ban, Bass in the middle, and then MLF just says, "Hey, we're lifting it all." Also, you can have 600 horsepower engines. I think that would make it even more interesting.
Now we're talking, dude.
But I don't know. I have a sneaky suspicion. If I was to guess, I think maybe MLF is. I think it's been a pretty strong rumor that they're probably going to do either one period you can use it or one period you can't use it, something like that.
I have seen
And
those.
then I've heard all rumors about the Tackle Warehouse series. I've heard it might be no change. It might be similar to what Bass did with a limitation, or it might be 3 events with, 3 events without. Now that's something I had an interest in. If NPFL had an alternative, like half the events with forward sonar and half the events without, I thought that would be pretty interesting.
I think that'd be a cool way to do things. I totally agree. I think that the last statement that Bass had, right? So the four things were one forward facing unit, maximum of 55 inches of screen space, and then no trolling motors on your power poles or anything like that. And then lastly, they said they're going to really try and be more diversified from a schedule perspective. And I think that is
That's a
maybe the
big factor.
most important factor in any of this, right? It's like, yes, we're seeing guys use forward facing in canals in Florida and all these different things. But the majority of the top 10 at, say, like the Mississippi River frogging or things like that, you're going to have less of that footage of just guys staring at the screen. So I think that's a factor that is overlooked in a lot of what we're doing.
Yeah. Like case in point, like the NPFL season this year, 5 of our 6 events have been postponed. And I think that didn't help with the anglers that aren't happy with forward sonar. I mean, we're in a schedule where forward sonar is very helpful. The big reason why I love the schedule so much this year, because I do not like. I'm not the biggest fan of spawn fishing. I almost would argue that I think bed fishing should be banned, because I think that's more detrimental to a you're directly affecting the spawning cycle of the fish. But for me, like, my strong suits is post spawning. That's the way I've always been. When I did college fishing, I would put in time idling, just finding stuff on side scan and fishing that in tournaments. That's how I like to groove. But I think scheduling is a really big aspect to this. I mean, we had an event last year on Wright Patman, and I think I finished in the top 20 in that tournament. Never had been there before, and I caught all my fish on a swim jig. It was one up shallow on a Cinco. That body of water, I don't think a fish lives offshore. It is, every fish is up on the bank around the bushes. And like the right bodies of water and the right time of year, you can alter the course of, does forward sonar dominate or not, just by scheduling properly.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how kind of things lay out. And I guess I want to get your take on this. Kind of have my thoughts, but I want to hear yours on with Bass's changes, right? What's been outlaid. Um, does this change anything in your eyes, especially like you're talking about with the youth coming up and just different details of having this regulations, or the regulations that are talked about? What does it do for you, or what's your take with Bass's stuff now that that's out?
I think Um, so Bass's ruling I really like. Number one, because I think it kind of stops the perception of this arms race that was happening, right? Because don't get me wrong, there have been boats we have rigged, whether they were young anglers or guys that were going out to fish the opens for the first time, that I do my best when someone talks about, hey, how's my boat be rigged? This is the tournament series I'm going to fish. I try to give my best recommendation of what truly is the best value for their money. And there were there's boats that we've done that I knew that, tried to explain to the customer that you don't need this much stuff on it to be competitive. Get good at one or two of this technology piece and then devolve from there. So I think ultimately, I think it's a good thing what Bass has done. I think it's going to stop that arms race. It's going to stop this perception that you need to have 40K in electronics on your boat. And it's going to allow people to be effective with, that one forward unit, and then utilizing their mapping, and probably more so get back at being good with side scan, down scan, 2D and mapping, because, there were some guys taking advantage of the jack plate technology to find suspended fish. Now that you can't have that on the jack plate, that's gone. So I think going back to how things were, where your map studying, your side scan, down scan, 2D game better be top notch to find those fish.
Yeah. I think the comment I made with Bailey the other day on it was like, there's going to be more of how it was prior to seeing live scopes on jack plates and or handheld units over the side of the boat.
Yep.
You're just gonna have to get up on your trolling motor more. There's gonna be more sit down and get up to look around.
And looking around. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, we'll probably see more seats on the front of boats next year.
There you go. Two guys getting too tired, having to stand up and get the trolling motor down. Like, gosh.
But yeah, no, I think it was a good decision. Obviously, like from a business standpoint, my goal is to sell as many fish finders and live scopes and batteries and wiring harnesses and all that stuff, so I can put money on my family's table so we can survive. But at the same time, too, I don't like seeing anglers put unrealistic setups on their boats, right? In reality, to compete at the highest level, a good single unit at the console, and then a mapping unit up front with a forward unit, or not even a forward unit, a 360 unit, is probably about all you need, depending on what you want to do. So I'm happy to see that arms race go away. I'm definitely happy to see that.
I have always touted that, or recently I've been simplifying my boat.
Yep.
And what I mean there is, like, you can get 98% of the way there with one forward facing unit on the front of your boat and good mapping. And like, there's just all these other things are so little incremental upgrades and use cases, in my opinion, that like my next boat, I'm kind of honestly thinking it's going to be a forward facing unit, a mapping unit on the front. So I'm gonna have two graphs on the front, and then I may even just do one on the console, like one 15-inch unit, or do
my favorite setup, I think it looks so clean, is a single like 15 or 16 at the console. And then up front, you do like a 10 or 12-inch mapping unit, and then you pick your flavor of whatever size forward unit you want on the front. That's a super clean setup to me.
That's money. That's exactly what I'm looking
for. And that's about all you need, really. Like, don't get me wrong, there's benefits to multitudes of mapping, but like, I think a lot of people got hung up on all the transducers that like Taku and Koya and some other guys were running. A good example of what I'm about to say is earlier this year, Brian knew on the front of his boat, we put 4 12-inch screens, one for 360, one for mapping, one for perspective, and one for forward. And it was in a nice 4 box on the front of the boat. Looked cool, but at the same time, you literally cannot interpret all that information in front of you. So while it's all up there, you can only look at, in reality, one screen at a time, unless somehow you have chameleon eyes and you can look all over the place. But like, he and I were out in his boat, and I was just like, I mean, this looks cool, but like, I can't interpret all this data myself, right? And still, like, I think the decision Bass made is the best one for right now. And I was listening to BTL last night, and it's bad I'm not going to remember his name, because I know he's been with Bass for a long time, but I think he's the Bass media editor or magazine editor. He was one of the guys that was on their technology board, and he went through the process of how they gathered the data to make this decision. And it was pretty much, They talked to the anglers, they took measurements of the graphs, they cataloged how many jack plate transducers were and how many they weren't. They talked to the top 10 after each event and had a survey that they pretty much verbally went over that captured how many fish that the angler recalled catching on forward sonar and not. They did this super in-depth year-long discovery process to get to the point they're at now. What I like about that is no different than in my life. I don't want government using the word ban, right? And when it comes to this decision, I think the smart thing is a stair-step approach. Let's collect data. Let's make a decision. Let's see how the industry reacts, how the viewership reacts. Does it react in a positive or negative way? All right, let's take the next step. Let's keep diving from there. I think a stair-step approach from Bass's perspective is the smart thing to do. While I know there was anglers that weren't happy with this first stair-step, if the data shows that it's in their best interest to keep knocking down how many transducers and screens we have, then that's the direction they're going to go, because they're going to have to say, hey, ultimately, we want more viewers, and the viewers say they want X, Y, and Z, or the anglers say they want X, Y, and Z, and they're going to find a compromise there.
Totally. I totally agree with a lot of that. And I think that it's a wise approach to take in data and see where things kind of end up. So applaud what they're doing. I totally think that it was a reasonable approach, and man, I'm on board with it. I think that it's needed. And I appreciate your transparency, right? Because at the end of the day, an arms race is great for you. It's like, hey man, we can try and put as many batteries and graphs and wiring. We'll take it all. But you're like, hey, this is good for me, but I'm going to be real too. Like, here's my opinion on it.
And it's interesting, like my business model, when a guy comes in wanting to set up, number one, we try to do what's in the best interest of what they currently have on their boat. We point out the flaws we see and offer recommendations for fixing them. But at the same time too, like if an angler wants 6 graphs on him and he's adamant he needs the 6 graphs, we'll install 6 graphs, but I'm going to pitch him pretty hard on, hey dude, trying to put 4 graphs in the front of this boat is not realistic. I think a better compromise would be to do X, Y, and Z. So I try to do my best to give people realistic expectations of what they should have on their boat. I try to understand who they are as anglers, what their tactics are as far as how they approach a body of water. Because I'm not going to tell a guy, hey, you need 2 live scopes on your boat when he tells me all he does is flip docks all day. We're not going to offer that recommendation. But yeah, I don't know. It's interesting times for sure. I'm curious to see what MLF's going to say. Like I said, and it's selfishly, I'm not happy with what NPFL has done, but at the same time, like I get they got to differentiate themselves, and I do hope it works out for them in this decision ultimately.
Yeah, totally. Well, man, I appreciate you taking the time, and more than anything, man, I hope you have a wonderful bachelor's trip with the boys. Excited for you there. Congrats on getting hitched as well.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. But man, a lot of noise. Hopefully you get escape some of that noise, a nice mountain lake, and spend some time. And certainly, man, we'll have to get you back on just as your decision kind of comes out for what you're doing next year. And of course, always good to talk Sonar Pros and everything you've got going on.
Yeah, brother. Great talking with you.
All right, man. You take it easy. Travel safe.
Yep, you did.
See ya.